Season 2 of Isekai Quartet brings us so much more from the most ambitious crossover in anime history. Just like last season, it's filled to the brim with numerous creative references and Easter eggs, even more so now than before since they've started bringing in so many additional iconic characters. Although this is meant to be a comedic show, the unique interactions they have between characters like, say, Naofumi and Wilhelm or Mare and Beatrice sometimes go to reference a deeper meaning. Something you wouldn't be aware of if you hadn't yet read the light novels. So let's continue with this series and take a look at all the Easter eggs in the first few episodes. Episode 1 begins with a few smaller, subtle references, the first being one to a recurring joke in the Konosuba universe. You see, AQUA wants everyone to believe that she's a real goddess, but no one in the class except for Ainz actually does. It's just like how in Konosuba not a single person believes her to be the goddess of water that she claims to be. Now, during this class, we find out that Roswaal was teaching a lesson on the subject of dust explosions. It wasn't just an arbitrary topic shoved in though. The dust explosion was actually referring to an event that's coming in ReZero's second season. Without getting too deep into any spoilers, let's just say that Subaru finds himself facing off against a demonic beast, and somewhere in that fight a dust explosion occurs. Next we get to a well-placed scene involving both Naofumi and Wilhelm. This was a very interesting interaction to put in because it served to reference multiple different things at the same time. Specifically with regards to Wilhelm giving Naofumi advice that he personally could have used back when he was younger. You see, Wilhelm finds Naofumi to be very similar to how he once was. Back when Wilhelm was only 14 years old, he had earned the title of Sword Demon through his fearsome feats of battle during a civil war against the Demi-Human Alliance. This title was mainly birthed from his unparalleled skill with the sword, but his antisocial attitude also played a significant factor. For the whole time before he met Tricia, Wilhelm didn't have a single person that he could call friend. His life simply consisted of going from battlefield to battlefield, a lonely escapade of continuous fighting. He wasn't even allowed to join the knighthood because his attitude was considered unbefitting of such a chivalrous position. If we take this story into consideration, there's quite a few similarities to be seen with Wilhelm being this misfit sword demon and Naofumi being the outcast demon of the shield. So this could have very well been the same lonely path Naofumi was headed down had he not met Raftalia. It was a unique situation that only someone like Wilhelm could tell that Naofumi was getting close to. Now, what makes this scene even better is that both Naofumi and the younger version of Wilhelm share the same voice actor, so it's kind of like a double-sided Easter egg. Shortly after this, we see both Wilhelm and Sebas sharing a cup of tea while discussing their favorite topic of love. This being an obvious reference to their similar stories of unlikely affection, specifically with Sebas saving Tuare and Wilhelm saving Tricia. Moving on to the baseball game, Darkness being unable to hit the ball is directly attributed to the same reason that she can never land a strike with her sword. She simply has terrible accuracy. So I guess the same thing applies to her when she's trying to swing a baseball bat. When Philo transforms into her human form, Aura, being the beast tamer she is, can't help but want to have Philo for herself. It was a fairly standard reaction for someone who collects magical beasts. On the other hand, we then got to see a display of Mare's significant strength. Even though he doesn't appear to be the most physically strong, he's actually rather balanced in terms of both his physical and magical abilities. Sure, his specialty is AoE support magic, but he can also handle himself in combat no problem, sometimes to the point of being even better than Shaltir. And on top of that, what he was using to hit the ball was the divine level item known as the Shadow of Yggdrasil, a very powerful item that he typically uses to improve his spells or bludgeon people's skulls. Just as you'd expect, anything being hit by this would receive significant damage, especially when the person doing the hitting is Mare. So when the ball was flying towards Raftalia and Philo, Ainz actually had his hand up ready to cast some magic. But after seeing that Naofumi was going to do something himself, he decided to sit back and watch instead, likely in order to gauge the power of his strange new classmate. Even Demiurge could be seen scoping out Naofumi after he had deflected the ball. If anything though, this scene just went to show how OP Mare really is. I mean, breaking both Airstrike Shield and Second Shield isn't something that we see too often in the Shield Hero anime, and it's not like it's a weak defensive move either. Mare is just that much stronger. Moving on to episode 2, the first interesting thing to note was the debate between Demiurge and Vanir. It gave us a nice little contrast between two demons who possessed completely opposite mindsets. So, as they discussed the concept of freedom, Demiurge, being more on the side of lawful evil, was arguing that freedom was something that needed to be earned. I mean, it does make sense that someone like him would see freedom as a privilege instead of a right, especially when it comes to those who are lesser beings than him. A good example of this would be with how Demiurge views Princess Renner in comparison to all other humans. On the other hand, Vanir, who tends to be more chaotic neutral, sees freedom as a means to destruction, something that's more beneficial to him as he is a demon that literally feeds on human shame and disappointment, though he would never go so far as to feed on someone's despair. That's more for Demiurge and his happy farm. In the next scene, we have AQUA trying to join Kazuma in his mission to invade the principal's office. Because AQUA's luck stat is utter garbage, Kazuma knew that this was a bad idea from the get-go. Just as I mentioned last episode, it's a known fact that all of AQUA's stats are maxed out except for her luck and intelligence. In fact, Kazuma himself has seen that AQUA's luck stat is the lowest possible level. It basically meant that her joining the team would inevitably lead to the plan failing. Now, once in the room, the flag of the Empire could be seen framed on the left wall. Then, the wine within the cabinet was labeled Rot. This is in reference to the name of a significant operation from Youjo Senki, one that goes by the formal title of Operation Rot Gelb, or in English known as Operation Revolving Door. It was a plan implemented by the Empire during the Great War with the intent of eliminating the entire Rhine army. So using the name of the wine to reference that was a nice little Easter egg. Once the traps had been triggered, the door mimic that we saw was likely a throwback to when AQUA had come across the chest mimic in Season 2. It explains why Kazuma immediately stated afterwards that AQUA was having memory problems. It's not like this was a monster that she wasn't familiar with. The same goes for the giant toads that came afterwards. Just like how AQUA's god blow didn't affect them when she was back in her own world, Newman's punch also didn't work either. Now, given AQUA's luck stat, it would have been foolish to entrust her to carry out the rest of the plan. So instead, Kazuma used a superior version of his lurk skill to hide, one that's referred to as concealment. Unlike lurk, which only makes him difficult to detect, concealment actually makes him invisible for a short period of time. And that's exactly what happens here. As AQUA was running away from the toad, Naofumi using Shield Prison to hide himself was very much on point with his character. We know very well that his trauma from mine runs deep. I mean, it's because of this that Naofumi has severe trust issues in the first place, especially when it comes to those who are female. So it makes sense that instead of getting involved, Naofumi decided to avoid the issue completely. Then, when AQUA says she'll bring down divine punishment, it led Naofumi to state how those who speak of God are by far the most untrustworthy people, obviously because of his past conflict with the priest and the Church of the Three Heroes. Once Kazuma was caught, Roswell showcased yet again some of his signature magic, a unique form of rainbow-colored mana that causes some of his spells to glow with different hues. The 5 of them would then be sent to detention in episode 3, bringing with it one of my favorite references from Isekai Quartet as a whole, reason being that the person in charge of their detention was actually a member of Nazarik's Worst 5, a group of lesser-known low-level NPCs who were designed to embody something downright awful or terrifying. The one that we see here is named KYOUHUKOU, the proud owner of the Worst Residence. Given his appearance, it should come as no surprise that he lives with a live army of cockroaches, thus the title. But they're actually pretty passive, as KYOUHUKOU himself is aligned as a rather neutral individual. He won't feed you to his roaches unless he has good reason to. So if him and his family are neglected of food, or if Nazarik is in need of a spare torturer, then being in his residence is somewhere you definitely don't want to be. Lucky for Kazuma and AQUA, they didn't get to experience the true form of torture that he usually doles out, but I'm sure it was something akin to what Sakura experienced back in Fate Zero. For the curious though, KYOUHUKOU's standard method of torture is to have your internal organs eaten then healed in a continuous cycle of pain. That way it also serves as an infinite food source for his family. But if you're someone who's unlucky enough to stumble onto a trap that teleports you to his domain, then you'll likely drown in a pool of roaches first before getting devoured alive. That being said, it also could have been a lot worse since they could have just put Neuronist in charge of detention instead. In any case, this was definitely a cameo I wasn't expecting to see in this series, but it really went to make the episode more enjoyable. It was almost as good as seeing Amelia and Megumin interact for the first time. Speaking of which, when Amelia goes to visit Rivergen, her kind-hearted nature leads him to come up with the exact same nickname that Subaru gave her in Season 1, EMT. What makes this scene even funnier is that Vanir is seen sitting there reading Rivergen's thoughts the entire time. In case you didn't know, Vanir has the ability known as Foresight, which gives him the power to read minds. Typically, he uses it to expose people's embarrassing secrets, thus allowing him to feed on their shame. While in the lab, Megumine's explosion is contained by a joint barrier spell from Weiss and Visha. It's a defensive formula that invokes a magical effect which produces a dense barrier, the density of which is dependent on the mage's skill and the amount of mana that they can pour into it. So it's quite impressive that they were able to create one that could contain Megumine's explosion. We then see more of these defensive barriers in action during the water cleanup. In addition to this, there was also the use of AQUA's Divine Staff, a weapon that she typically uses to boost the potency of any spells that she casts. Now, just as we see here, Kazuma tends to view AQUA's manipulation of water as just one big party trick. To him, all that she was doing was just putting on a show. But this wasn't just Kazuma trying to make fun of her though. There's actually a specific reason as to why he feels this way, and it explains why all of AQUA's water spells turn out to be so extravagant. You see, when AQUA first became an adventurer, she ended up putting all her skill points into the party trick skill tree, boosting her affinity for entertaining and amusing others. So when Kazuma says that she's the goddess of party tricks, well, he's not entirely wrong about that. Anyway, that's pretty much every Easter egg or reference from the first few episodes. If you liked seeing all these subtle details explained, then be sure to leave a like or comment to let me know that you enjoyed it. Also, if you're a fan of ReZero, then be sure to stick around for my next video which will cover everything the anime skipped from Season 2. Now, as always, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this type of anime content, then you already know what to do. So, until next time, ciao!